very late last night. I think we collectively got about 5 hours of sleep between all of us. So
Handing it all together.
running on fumes and coffee. But thank you for all your work, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. We will be taking some questions and covering a lot of stuff in this discussion. So pop them in the Q&A, and we'll get to as many as we can. So let's talk about the elephant in the room first. This was not a happy night for a lot of people in San Francisco, and in particular Democrats. And Trump is going to be president again, and that is going to have some major implications for whoever wins the mayor's race and for the city as a whole. And Fitz and Gabe, you both did a little bit of reporting on this for our last newsletter, Power Play, and when you talked to some folks about how the city is steeling itself for a second Trump term, and what did you learn there?
Yeah, so actually I was on the phone with City Attorney David Chu this morning, and he was going into kind of what he expects the city will be doing when it comes to challenging the Trump administration from a legal standpoint. The city already has a history of doing that. I believe they've filed dozens, if not hundreds, of lawsuits against the Trump administration. Still is like a little unclear, of course, what the battle might look like. We don't, exactly know what Trump is going to do, but, it's pretty clear that they're already thinking about how they're going to try to act as like a bulwark against, some of the potentially worst impulses of the Trump administration. Probably is going to have to do with immigration. I think is probably the one everyone is thinking about. Trump had promised, quote, mass deportations. And I think that, the city attorney's office is probably, that's like going to be their number one priority. We had a proposition pass, Prop O, that will help firm up abortion rights here in San Francisco. Probably that is going to be another topic they're thinking about, among a litany of others.
Yeah, and on a state level, the Attorney General has filed more than 100 lawsuits against the Trump administration. As Attorney General Bonta was saying earlier in a statement to us for the Power Play newsletter, we've seen this playbook before. They unfortunately, or fortunately, as they put it, have had experience with the Trump administration. They know some of his tactics, and they have said that they are analyzing his promises and pledges for this presidential administration, so they know what legal avenues to prepare for. I mean, now they didn't want to talk about it at length because, of course, they don't want to tip their hands, but they were willing to say that, of course, is in realms like environment, public safety, civil rights, health. And we know that Governor Gavin Newsom is also preparing, as he announced that he's going to prepare a disaster fund for, in case California needs aid, because Trump has started to pull it from California, to not provide it in times of need. So there's repercussions all up and down the state.
Yeah, and we're certain to learn a lot more on that in the coming days, I think. So let's talk about the mayor's race. We wrote last night, you were actually there, Gabe, at the Daniel Lurie party. He looks like he's in a strong position right now, although Mayor Lyndon Breed said, it ain't over till it's over, basically. But what were some of your takeaways about the mayor's race? Yeah,
so, little bit of background. In the kind of final weeks of the election, we all saw that things were kind of headed in Daniel Lurie's direction. Yesterday, kind of an interesting little factoid I got was that the Lurie party had 1,000 RSVPs, over 1,000 RSVPs, while the other mayor's parties had, a couple hundred. And I think we all sort of saw the momentum building, and it definitely played out on election day. I believe most people think that Lurie will probably become mayor, barring some strange thing that happens with the votes. And like the energy at the party was like electric, I would call it. Like people were really excited for Daniel. It was a bunch of people who, had taken a lot of risk jumping on to his campaign from the beginning, who I think felt very vindicated by the message they've been telling voters. And something else very interesting was that there was no single elected official at the campaign party besides I saw Matt Haney. And there might have been a couple others that I didn't see, but I think that actually is a interesting kind of taste of potentially what's to come. Like Lurie calls himself an outsider, and that's debatable whether he truly is, but I think that who is coming to congratulate him is an interesting sign of where things are to go.
So all the people from the political establishment were not there, but where they are probably at Breed's party, I guess.
Yeah, they're probably at Breed's, at Peskin's, Farrell's, and so, yeah, I mean, he gave pretty much what was a kind of a victory lap speech. And it was, about essentially bringing in change to City Hall. It's going to be the first time in over a century that someone without any governmental experience is in office. So it'll be very interesting to see how, what he does with this and who he brings in. If he actually is going to bring in leadership who is dramatically different than what we've seen over the last couple decades. Or if he may choose people that are more familiar with the City Hall.
That sounds like the opposite vibes than what you were talking about at Farrell's party, huh?
Yeah. So I stopped by Farrell's party at midnight, and it was already empty. Yeah.
Oh, that's painful. Yeah. When it wraps that early, things are not going well.
Yeah, he conceded probably at the second or third round of the results drop. So
yeah, that's right. It was not looking good for him even very early on.
Yeah.
What was Breed's party like?
Well, what was crazy? I found this interesting, and it really speaks to Breed's charisma, is that it was like a funeral in the beginning, right? Everyone was kind of feeling the results. They were seeing how bad it was. She didn't get there right away when the first results were there. Mm-hmm. And people I was talking to was they had their heads in their hands. They were, staring at their phones their pet had died. But Breed came in and she spoke to them and she said, essentially what you were saying, Annie, it isn't over yet. I've been here before in 2018 against Mark Leno. I was down in the early returns and then I surged back up later on in later tallies in the coming days. And she just has this personal charisma that I think uplifted that whole room. So even though it felt like a funeral for a while, she was able to energize them, at least for a little bit. And then everyone, I think, came back to reality as the returns kept coming and coming,
Yeah, I mean, generally, how realistic is it for her to overcome this kind of deficit at this point?
Yeah, not realistic at all.
Yeah, I think in 2018 it was pretty close, and then she climbed up a little bit, and then won, right? But this time, as we see from all those polling, everybody's saying so close, but turns out Lurie's winning 56 to 44. That was, quite surprising to me.
Yeah.
It's not even close, I would say. Yeah.
Professor that I was speaking to today, Jason McDaniel from San Francisco State University, who's a ranked choice expert, he was looking at the difference in voting between the successive drops that occurred last night and made note that there was not that much difference when it came to all of them. Lurie basically maintained his lead throughout. His percentage went down just a tiny bit, but for the most part, things remained pretty consistent, and that's what leads him to believe that Lurie's in a pretty good position to take it, and it'd be difficult for Breed to overcome.
Yeah. And we have to remember, too, that, zooming out the lens a little bit to think about Breed's prospects, this is not just about Breed. This is about this kind of post-pandemic hangover, this extreme desire for change from the electorate. We saw that in the East Bay. We saw the recalls succeed against Sheng Tao and Pam Price, and we've seen that through the electorate writ large since the pandemic, in the recalls of Jason Boudin and the school board. That frustration, that bottled up frustration, has just made this desire for change, and we're seeing it expressed in the votes.
Mm-hmm.
That's why voters are attracted to the outsider image, right?
Yeah, it's a perfect time for that message. It really is. It's not his money definitely helped. $8 million of your own money is not nothing. But if that was not attached to that message, I don't think it would have won. But then again, he needed the money too.
Yeah.
Right. Right. I was looking at some of the maps this morning with the results, and one of the things that jumped out at me is that Breed really underperformed on the west side. I mean, there were precincts where she was, 15% or in that ballpark. And Han, you spend a lot of time in that area and have written about it. What do you make of that?
So yeah, I was very surprised to see actually in some precinct Bree is the number 4th, even has lower support than Peskin, right, which is the progressive. Normally they don't do well on the west side. So I was talking with some, Breed circle, and people would say yes on K might play a role because K, as we all know, it's the ballot measure close to Great Highway. It's so contentious and basically become like a single issue that a lot of voters put on their mind. Like, oh, if you're supporting that, then of course I'm not supporting you. So on the west side, yes, Breed is the only supporter of K, and that might play a role of a lot of West Side voters not voting for her. And if we see on the map right now, the West Side mostly go for Farrell and Lurie, and also some of them goes to Peskin, right? So all these are against K, so that might play a role. And West Side, I remember Bree did pretty well on the West Side in 2018 as the moderate pick, but this time it's a different story. Yeah.
Yeah, and we should note that Kay is looking like it's sitting pretty, but the results, like you're saying, in the west side show that heavy repudiation of it.
Yeah, Kay now is 53 to 47, which is closer than expected if you compare it to 2022 to JFK 5, which is like 6 to 4, right? So it is I would say very divisive and contentious. And we don't know what the final result will look like, but on the west side, I think it's pretty firmly, it's a hard no from a lot of west side people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Lurie did quite well on the west side.
Yeah. And I don't know why now, but maybe K plays a role and also the outsider image. And I would say both Farrell and Lurie, they do pretty well on the west side, but if you see on the map, Lurie is the number 1, but the rank choice, they rank both of them, right? So the votes are concentrating on both of the candidates there.
Why do you think Aaron had trouble on the west side? I mean, he's been a neighborhood preservation kind of candidate for a long time. He's talked a lot about pushing back against density, which the west side, loves to hear. Why do you think he's had trouble?
That's a really good question, right? So yes, I think for the NIMBY vibe, yes, maybe he is with them, but there's a lot of other issues that West Side people might care, right? Like both the school board recall and Chaser recall, and that's still, people still talk about it right now. And just being a progressive, the label is right there. So
and also being kind of like the ultimate City Hall insider when the electorate clearly wants something fresh and different, and Aaron Peskin is somebody who's been in office for the better part of 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So hard to argue that, you can be a change maker when...
Men around the block.
Right.
Yeah.
It is the exact opposite message of the moment.
Right. We got a question for you. Fitz, you bring up 1991 as a previous time where an unhappy electorate unseated an incumbent. Have there been previous times when the Board of Supervisors was this inexperienced, off the top of your head?
Yeah, well, I mean, the class of 2000. The class of 2000 came in, and they were kind of fresh faces. And this was an interesting time because we didn't know what was going to happen when we changed in the city from citywide elections to district elections. And so we got like a class of folks who had just kind of come in and had never, hadn't really been in City Hall before. And what I gotta say is they did legislate the heck out of that time. They took that ball and they ran with it. They ran a progressive agenda, and you could agree or disagree with that agenda, but they implemented it. And a lot of that was tenants' rights, which I talked about in a story about Peskin just recently. So I'm glad they asked that because I've been mired in that research for days. But so that's an interesting point because less experienced candidates have been able to go into the Board of Supervisors and be able to make change, which in my Pollyanna-ish kind of way, I always think is kind of cool because it's like this, you can be a citizen who kind of just wants to do something for the city and get into that office and actually do something.
So, someone told me an interesting fact this morning that since the class of 2000, Joel Engardio has been the only candidate who's unseated a supervisor that was brought
Elected.
in by voters. Yeah, that was formally brought in by voters. And this time around, we might see multiple incumbents get unseated.
Yeah.
So they're really like the shakeup among the Board of Supervisors could be truly historic at this point.
Yeah, there's that change vibe again. It just keeps cropping up.
Yeah, I remember Guatemala was the first one to be unseated because, I mean, he's voted in and then getting unseated. He's the first one, but a lot of appointed supervisors were voted out. But this year, yes, we see a lot of incumbents are in a really tough battle right now.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit about which races kind of we're paying attention to specifically. Which are the ones we've covered? The District 5 race with Dean Preston competing against Bilal Mahmoud and a couple other candidates. What are the races that are looking like they're going to come down to the wire?
So District 1 is in really tight situation right now.
35 votes.
35.
That's like
So last night we have 2 rounds of results, and it's all. Both of the results were within super tiny margin, and I think which is between Supervisor Connie Chan, who's the progressive, and versus the moderate challenger Ma Zhang-Fuhao, who ran for the seat for the 3rd time this time. But maybe this time she has the biggest chance because of the redistricting and then the political vibe of the moderate taking over, right? But also because of the school closure, Connie's taking some points right now. So it's going to be super tight. And also the progressive labor has been dumping a lot of money trying to save Connie.
Much.
Yeah. And for District 3, which is the Chinatown seat, it's looking good for Danny Sauter right now, which is the moderate pick. And that's critical because, yes, District 3 will possibly turn moderate after Paskin. That's going to be a big shift in the Board of Supervisors. And then Sharon Lai is trailing maybe more than 1,000 votes right now, so it's unlikely. I wouldn't say so, but yeah, Danny's looking pretty good. And then District 5, Dean Preston, and a very high-profile national figure. I think after ranked choice now, Bilal is leading a couple hundred votes, right?
It was amazing the shift because it really did go. It shifted to Preston. It was like Bilal and then Dean and then Bilal again.
Yeah.
I was there at El Rio last night, where the progressives go to drown their sorrows at the end of election nights. And there were some, some Dean supporters who were like chipper and happy when I walked in. They're like, "Oh yeah, the votes shifted progressive," and then when the last results came in, all of a sudden those same people were like
picking up the glass.
And I think Dean, as we all know, is the iconic progressive voice, right? If he's losing, then of course the whole board, the political wind will be very moderate, like moderate takeover for sure.
I was also surprised by the D5 results because if you looked at the March primary data, it actually showed that area voting really progressive when it came to a lot of the ballot measures. And so I think there was some talk of Bilal will not be able to overcome this. But clearly the money propelling Bilal, whether it was the issue along Divisadero where there's this car wash that's been sitting there for years and years and years and years, around the messaging around housing, there was a lot of money put behind Bilal as well from, I believe it was the Grow SF contingent too. So I think that definitely, that race has really surprised me. I thought Dean was really gonna kind of be able to clear house on that.
Yeah.
Well, he also created a strategy with Scotty Jacobs. Is that right?
Yeah. Moderate. Yeah.
Who's another moderate contender in the race. So that may have helped him.
It really does point to the idea that progressives really need a ranked choice strategy. This is definitely something where they're kind of falling down this election, especially the supervisors. On the idea of progressive candidates doing badly, even though the ballot measures are doing well, that's a long-held pattern. Progressive ideas in San Francisco have very often won the day. I mean, it was Tom Amiano progressive supervisor who had the idea of like universal health care in San Francisco. And once that idea started taking off, Gavin Newsom was like, hey, that's a cool idea. Sidle in on that. And now he touts it as one of his signature wins, one of his signature issues. So those ideas, progressives often propel them into victory, and we're seeing that on the ballot measures, right? Prop C with the Inspector General, which was Aaron Peskin's thing in order to nip corruption in the bud. Prop G, affordable housing subsidies for low-income folks, especially seniors, and Prop E, which is the commission reform that's more progressive. So all these progressive ballot measures, all the ideas carrying the day, but the candidates, maybe not.
Yeah. We have a question from Mike, who asks, how influential are voter guides like Grow SF and Together SF Action? And I think we have some things we could say about that based on the results.
Yeah,
What do you think?
so yesterday I did write in the Election Life blog that Grow SF's voter guide online sees like a huge traffic spike. Like I think they were telling me it's like almost 3,000 unique visitors every hour, which is pretty good. And they said they have like a total of 200K voters this whole election season of visitors viewing their endorsement. I'm not sure about Together SF, but yeah, these two are probably the most active and also aggressive, moderate-leaning political endorsement. And yes, I think one reflection of how powerful and influential they are is District 7, because District 7 is the race that most of the endorsement go to Myrna, like DCCC, Chronicle, while Together and Grow SF endorsed the other candidate. And we see the result actually, Matt Boscato, which is challenging Myrna, Supervisor Melgar is doing pretty good. Yeah.
I think also one little part of this voter guide thing too that's interesting, I think we've all discussed a little bit, is the online war that was waged over these voter guides. I was on the night of Halloween, I was with a friend who typed into Google progressive voter guide, or I think it was the pissed off voter guide, and Grow SF pops up as the first choice. And so like there clearly was a lot of money, and I think time spent, my guess, by people familiar with how to sort of game, this isn't the right term, but how to really like promote it in a certain direction. And so that was just another kind of interesting observation I saw with the voter guides too.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting to look at like actually which organization's endorsement is the most influential. Maybe we should do a polling, right? Like DCCC, pissed off voter, the League, right? SF Bernicrats, newspaper, Grow SF, and all those Democratic club. Like, actually, let's do a rank, like which is the most powerful endorsement.
Which endorsements won out?
The most coveted, right? Because we think DCCC might be the one. There are Grow SF, there are some other progressive ones.
Although the funny thing about the DCCC endorsements, and we noted this earlier in a Power Play newsletter item, but the DCCC may have made certain endorsements of propositions and candidates, but they really tailored that message depending on the district, right? They didn't highlight their position on K in the West Side, and and they I think the scuttlebutt, right, was that they let the candidates choose what ballot measures appeared there.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. So it's hard to measure their influence when they're very careful.
Hiding some of their information.
Yeah. Oh, we endorse that? Oh, no.
Yeah.
Pretty bad.
In the case of Together SF, I think it's fair to say that they did not have a very good night. And Prop D looks like it's, trailing. Yeah. And of course, their candidate Mark Farrell was eliminated early.
I think I was talking to someone this morning about kind of like, why did Farrell do so badly, and like why did that whole kind of contingent of people do so poorly? I think that they probably chose public safety as too hard of a message. Like they went full on, like, we're going to be law and order, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, forgetting that like there are other issues out there that people care about. And like I think Lurie was able to like really thread the needle on that by like no one's gonna call him like a progressive on public safety. Like he's channeled that, but he also didn't like that wasn't his only message.
Right.
And I think that it's also clear that kind of that city hall insidery, we want to kind of clear out house, get rid of the corruption, get rid of all the graft, was a popular item among voters, not only with Lurie, but with Prop C too, with Peskin's Inspector General item. Like, clearly people are thinking about this. They're frustrated with all these scandals that have come out, and they clearly showed that in this election.
Yeah, it was to your point about Farrell and being kind of a single issue candidate. There was definitely some of the analysis I was hearing from folks last night was like there was definitely a time in around August or so that was his like moment to kick into another gear and choose that other issue, pick that other lane, and when he didn't, that's when you kind of see his momentum start to flag. Especially because the law and order thing has kind of waned a bit as crime has, we've seen a shift in the data.
Yeah, I think Farrell's campaign is, there's a lot of scandal, right, ethics concern, but also his campaign is just focusing or concentrate on the public safety, which is, we call him the most conservative pick, right? That's probably like a shrinking smaller and smaller community in San Francisco. And one big example, which is also surprising to me, is Prop F, the police retirement ballot measure.
Right.
That's also not winning. You would think that all the law enforcement thing, police thing, of course will have the voter support, right? But turns out no. And that's also making, why Farrell.
And that's what makes me think that this kind of post-pandemic headache, I'm kind of like, this is pet theory, I don't know how true this is, but the idea that when people felt it most intensely, there was like this like law and order, just do everything you can to stop what's happening right now. And now it's kind of fading, and now it's transformed into more of like this, we want change, throw these guys out. But it's like, it's waning, right?
Yeah.
It's waning. And this is where it's at in this shift as it's waning. And where it goes in the next year or two, does it fade completely? We don't know.
Yeah. We have another question. Please keep them coming. We love your questions. Any way too early predictions as to what's next for London Breed, assuming that she does lose this race? What are you hearing?
I've not really heard much, to be honest with you. I think they were probably keeping that pretty close to their chest. But I wouldn't be surprised if she maybe went to like some nonprofit work in the city.
Yeah, that's the speculation.
Yeah, that's like my best guess.
That's the biggest speculation.
I did speak with her about this in Chicago when I was at the DNC, and I asked her that question. I think, if Kamala had won the presidency, I think some sort of appointment may have been in the realm of possibility. But she said she's not sure, what exactly she wants to do next, but she said that, suggested that people had kind of talked to her about running for Congress or, things like that. But she said her wish is to stay in San Francisco. She said, I don't want to live in Sacramento or DC. She really loves this city. So, based on that, I wouldn't be surprised if she sticks around and does something in the private sector, as you mentioned. So. And
the thing that I have always heard about, another reason she hasn't jumped ship to DC or Sacramento or something, is she did enjoy or need some degree with people she helps supports that level of pay that she was making. So whatever she shifts to, I would imagine she tries to find something in that ballpark.
Yeah, she did mention that.
$380,000.
Yeah, and ain't it nice?
Yeah, and she did mention that too. When I spoke with her, saying the private sector looks kind of appealing because you could make money, and because she does have family members that she helps to support. So,
right.
All right. I mean, well, let's talk about what. So let's assume that Lurie wins. What do we know about who is going to be around him, what his priorities are going to be, and who his staff is going to consist of?
I mean, he has shown the ability to like kind of reach out to some of the best minds. We know that he has Jason Elliott and Steve Cava, former kind of
Newsom people.
Newsom people, Ed Lee people in his Rolodex of folks to call. So even though he's an outsider, we know that he has tapped insiders for help and for knowledge. So it doesn't, to me, seem like the realm of impossibility that he brings figures like that into his administration.
Yeah, we actually have a specific question from Michael who wants to know who is going to be his chief of staff.
Oh, yeah, gosh, isn't that the $280?
$108,000 question.
Thank you,
Yeah.
$1,000 question.
There were some rumors.
Yeah, there are some rumors, possibly some former Newsom era people might come back, right? But
that was rumored for a while.
yeah.
There was also a Peskin rumor, which is bad.
Yes,
Yeah.
Peskin the
Yeah.
Nine.
Squash that quickly. Yeah.
Well, but it wouldn't be the worst choice. I mean, the thing about Peskin is even both people who praise him and who hate his guts all say it for the same reason, because he's a master of the arcane arts of the city charter and the city government agencies and how they work. The people who hate him say he's a Machiavellian who pulls strings behind the scenes, and the people who love him say he really knows how to make it work. So someone like Peskin.
But will Peskin say yes to a job like that, right?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah.
I would imagine. Sorry,
Oh, no, go ahead.
I would imagine some of the campaign people might join, City Hall. But I think a big question is like, police chief, MTA chief, all those people,
Yes.
right? Will that like a big turnover? Like, a lot of them would be gone or now? Yeah,
true.
he's gonna fire police chief, right? I think.
Well, we reported in our newsletter that who's the police former
Paul.
cop who endorsed him?
Oh, Paul Yap.
Yeah. Is that what you're still hearing?
I did ask around about potential, new police chief, but unlikely it's gonna be Paul. I mean, for now, but I don't know.
And also definitely a new transit chief is what I'm hearing as
Yeah.
well, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
he's probably on his way out.
Yeah, that probably would have happened in any case.
In any
matter
event,
what. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's very fair. Well, whoever he brings in there, they're going to have their hands full because
Yeah.
there's that $800 million deficit looming. I mean, by all accounts, Mayor Breed patched a lot of the budget issues this year with one-time uses, essentially like the governmental equivalent of finding change under your couch cushions. And now some very big structural changes are going to happen to the city's budget in order to meet that deficit. So I don't envy anyone who has to walk out of that administration. My gosh.
And the
You're-
chaos of the schools too. He has to inherit. Of course, he's not directly overseeing it, but like he has to oversee the fixing of that issue as
And
well.
I think Lurie probably is the best person to make all those tough cuts, right? Because he has no baggage or all those personal relations within the whole city hall. If there's a tough choice to make to cut, he can just do it. Compared to all those insiders, they might have like 20 years of all those connections that they might have to do this and do that. Yeah.
Something
That's
I'm
true.
also hearing to a little bit is this idea of trying to fill the gaps of the city budget with private money too. And there's this whole like idea of a private public partnership with certain city projects. And like if there was one person that knows they have some rich people on speed dial, it is Daniel Lurie, right?
I mean, that was his whole job.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, like he's a fundraiser. So like, there was one political analyst I was talking to who was mentioning like, is there a time and place for him to call up someone and be like, hey, like this program is, we might have to cut this program. Would you be willing to step in, X, Y, and Z? So he definitely brings like a certain skill set and set of contacts, I imagine, that might be useful in that time, but we'll have to wait and see actually if that remains to be true.
That's really possible because one of his housing miracle he's selling to the voters, the 850 brand, that's like has a big part of the private funding to kickstart the project, like 15 million, right? So probably that's one of the avenue that he will govern the city, getting a lot of private support.
Yeah. But, and with things like the budget deficit, I mean, that is, no matter how he winds up handling it, that is going to piss off a lot of people and make his job pretty difficult.
Well, but he's in for 4 years, so he's not immediate re-election pressure.
It'll also be interesting to see how how does the economy of San Francisco fare in the next couple of years too. Like, I think that will be a major determination of whether he stays in office or not. If we start to see like the continued decline of people coming and visiting, the like the events that companies hold here every year, people continue to pull out of those. We see continued empty storefronts in downtown, and not like this feeling of we're moving in a different direction. I could easily see people being like, all right, get them out of here, let's try a different solution, right?
And often, in Bay Area races, people who get in on ranked choice wind up being very unpopular. I mean, Exhibit A would be Chesa Boudin. Gene Kwan, the former mayor of Oakland, comes to mind. It's the system is intended to kind of produce a consensus candidate, but in many cases, people end up being very unhappy with that person. So that plus the major challenges he would have to deal with could make it a rocky road.
Yeah.
A question from Frank. He asks, isn't it contrary to law for elected officials to raise money for the city or nonprofits? I guess that was in response to what you shared about him potentially fundraising.
So from my understanding, you have to go through the Board of Supervisors to make that legal. Han, you've written a little bit about this.
For the pandas.
Yeah. So in the example of the pandas, the city got an exemption to have private funders come through and fill the gap for the $25-30 million that the pandas cost.
Yeah.
So there is a way to do it. And you have to get board approval.
Yeah. So the logic is, if like, for example, United Airlines has a big contract with SFO, right? So they technically are, have interest within city government. So if they're okay, we're donating 10 million to support Panda, there might be conflict of interest, right? Because I have some stake in the city. So the Board of Supervisors will green light, basically set an exception for them to get that big donation. That's the logic. Yeah, talking about pandas, I guess Daniel Lurie will be the one cutting the ribbon when they arrive.
Well,
will they invite
or
Mayor
is he going
Breed?
to cancel the project?
Oh, yeah,
possible.
true. Well, so that brings up another point, which I think is interesting, because some of the things that mayors and supervisors do take years to unfold, right? So we're seeing the passage of Proposition M. All these tax reforms are going to happen. That's a signature issue. Mayor Breed and Supervisor Peskin kind of came to the table, negotiated this thing. What if we see a scenario where Prop M really actually helps revitalize downtown? Businesses all of a sudden swing back in, and who's in office? Daniel Lurie. Who gets to take all the credit? Daniel Lurie. Wouldn't that be wild?
Well, and
voters don't make those connections. They're like, oh, Daniel Lurie's in office. He did that.
Of course.
Well, yeah, I think that's the whole thing of politics, right? It's about taking credit. Yeah.
Yes, there's a political skill to making sure people know that you did that thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, how do you guys feel about the fact that, Trump will be the president and how that could change the dynamic here? I mean, I think... during the first Trump term, San Francisco was kind of a foil, for the Trump administration. You mentioned we were involved in a lot of litigations against the Trump administration. And, I think that we'll see if Daniel Lurie wins how he would fare in that role. But I think London Breed was, reasonably effective sort of foil for President Trump. What do you think about that? I mean, how could that change things? The fact that we have... likely a very antagonistic federal branch.
Yeah.
One of the first things that occurs to me is that, San Francisco depends a lot on the federal purse for large projects and other things. So there's all sorts of ways in which federal funding comes into play in the city. But one of the most obvious ways is for large projects. Will a Trump administration let San Francisco green light a I don't know, this is way too far down the line, but even money to study a new Transbay tube, or turning that giant bus station that we have into an actual train station, the Salesforce Transit Center. What large projects will we have to put on hold because a Trump administration might say, "Oh, you're a sanctuary city? I'm sorry, no federal funding for you."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We were discussing this a little bit earlier today, but I also think it might be able to put some fire underneath the political careers of certain people here in San Francisco. We mentioned David Chu possibly as an example of someone who for the next couple of years can really highlight the fact that he's fighting the Trump administration, and if he ever wanted to run for mayor, this is going to be, that kind of like anti-Trump kind of coalition that he could build could be somewhat powerful. Yeah, it's a really interesting question to think, like, how will Lurie react to all this? Certainly Lurie, I don't know. I really haven't really been able to get any indications of that. He certainly isn't from what I can tell, like a brawler, more like Breed, who's kind of okay to, pull up her sleeves and kind of get more into a fight. I don't think that's Daniel Lurie. But I think that remains to be seen. It's certainly something that I really want to find out.
Yeah, I can imagine Breed and Farrell be very combative on national level politics, but Daniel Lurie seems to be too strong of a nice guy personality. Will he talk harsh on Trump or that kind of a national level politics?
Yeah. We have a question about Catherine Stephanie, who is poised to head to the state assembly. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on what her move to Sacramento might entail?
So she won landslide last night, and then she will resign early December. I was told by the campaign actually tomorrow they will start their orientation that early, right? Wow. So she will be the next assemblywoman for San Francisco, likely, for the next decade, right? Representing the west side of the city, replacing Phil Ting. And yes, Phil Ting used to be the budget chair of the state assembly, and then, very powerful seat. And, Catherine might need some time to really build up her career there, right? But yes, all the funding, a lot of state level support will come from the legislature, and she will probably play a big role. And as we can see from Scott Wiener, right? Also a very high profile state senator. He always legislates something and then makes San Francisco as a pilot program, pilot city, right? The 4 a.m. alcohol or, safe injection site, right? So yes, Catherine Stephanie might also, play a role like that too.
Yeah, and during her time on the Board of Supervisors, she's been a consistent voice on public safety and is very passionate about gun control legislation. Women's rights. So I think we can reasonably expect her to continue, working on those issues in the legislature.
Yeah. Do you think I know she kind of wasn't she an aide to Mark Farrell at some point? Yeah. So, and she, represented this really moderate, almost quasi-conservative base in D2. Mm-hmm. How do you think she was able to propel herself out of that to the state legislature, and someone like Farrell has been able to undo that? Has she just been able to kind of broaden her policies a little bit more to create a better coalition?
Yeah, I think that's
voters.
That's a really good question. I do think Catherine Stephanie is somehow popular on the West Side, even though West Side is heavily Asian American, right? And then Phil Ting, Fiona Ma, Li Ling Yi, they always the Asian American taking that seat. But I think Catherine Stephanie has always been outspoken on public safety, and also she's the first one to came out support the recall of Chesa, right? The first elected official. So she's probably on a lot of political issues, she's standing with the West Side people, and that make her stand out. And she's consistent, kind of, in the local politics, while Farrell has been out of the spotlight for a while.
It reminds me of conversations I had in the Asian community after Joel Engardio won over Gordon Marr in the D4 seat on the West Side, and was asking about representation. Isn't it? Don't you think that it may hurt the Asian community? I would ask, to lose Asian representation in that seat. But what a lot of folks would tell me is, well, look, hey, Joel supported those recalls, and that matters to us more. These issues matter to us more than just simply the representation. Is also about what issues you stand on, and even though Catherine Stephanie is taking a seat that has been historically Asian, like you're saying, she is kind of aligned with the West Side on those issues.
More moderate. And talking about all those Asian voters supporting Ingardio, now Ingardio putting K on them.
Oh,
One wonders
Is there going to be a recall?
If he'll be well, there were threats of a recall, but
I don't know.
we'll
But
see where we are in a few years. But he may be punished for that at the ballot box.
yeah, there are some rumored candidates potentially running for D4 too, but we'll see. Yeah.
We have another question from Juan. Given our discussion about Grow SF, Together SF, and online searches prioritizing certain voter guides, and Daniel Lurie leading, what does this say about grassroots organizing in San Francisco?
Very interesting question.
Well, the one of the grassroots ballot measures, Proposition L, the fund the bus measure to do a grocery streets tax of Uber and Lyft and other ride shares, that one's doing it was doing well. The only thing that's knocking it out is the fact that Proposition M has that poison pill if it gets more votes than Prop L, the tax reform measure. So if you took M out of the picture, that grassroots organizing for Prop L, all those volunteers at every farmer's market with their, goofy little fund the bus shirts and their goofy bus pins and just looking like a bunch of cute nerds putting out that Prop L stuff, they managed to get a healthy majority.
Yeah.
And so you could say that grassroots organizing, at least for ballot propositions, is doing quite well.
Yeah, Prop L is a pretty impressive example. Yeah, grassroots, and then they put on the ballot. And after it's on the ballot, Mayor Bree, Speaker Pelosi, all those political support like pouring in, right? So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, this came out of a community of transit advocates who just really care about seeing public transit do better in San Francisco. You can disagree with them, but this was not like from the elected sphere or the sphere of kind of moneyed interest. That was from these transit advocates.
Yeah, we also have a comment from Marie, who points out that Connected SF, this was one of the new groups that was formed in the last few months. They endorsed Lurie, and so we have seen this kind of constellation of these new groups that, I think if Grow SF and perhaps Connected SF is any guide, it seems like they're seeing some success.
Making waves,
Yeah, and it's a different form of organizing. I think, as you mentioned, Grow SF has been very savvy about getting their information out there, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of that in elections to come.
Yeah. How many SF we have right now? Together SF, Grow SF, Abundant SF, Connected SF.
My God, can I
We need
At
to
the
keep
bus
it-
stop the other day, I saw
Yes.
something called Yes SF.
Yeah, yes SF. That's
What
from
is yes-
from the Chamber of Commerce. Yeah.
I love it.
Lord. Someone do like a Frisco name. How about Frisco Together? How about that?
Yeah.
So any other surprises from election night?
I think for school board, now the moderate slate and also another moderate candidate, 4 of them are winning. And then the current incumbent school board president, Matt Alexander, is ranking number 5. So it's still too close to call, but the school board, you can tell the sentiment is like, okay, incumbent, we're not considering them because, all the mess, right? So we can see a lot of new faces joining the school board too. But, they're gonna have a lot of challenges to take over, so it's not gonna be easy for them.
Yeah.
I think I'm a little bit surprised by the amount of people that don't want to quote unquote reform City Hall, the measures E and D, because it kind of runs I feel like slightly counter to this, like, we want change, we want to root out corruption, we want to do something about the bureaucracy. And so even though it looks like Measure E might end up passing, I'm still trying to kind of like figure that one out and dissect that. I think maybe people potentially got the message that like, oh, it's, you know, connected to a lot of these moneyed interests, particularly Prop D. But that one I'm kind of still surprised about. I would have thought there would have been more people coming out to support those two measures.
Yeah.
And that maybe that message of like the arbitrariness of that 65 commission number in Prop D, the number that would cap the commissions at, I feel like maybe that message actually got out. I was hearing that from lots of people, people who I wouldn't normally think of as keyed in to elections, like. And Joe, what's with that number? Did it just come out of nowhere? It sounds like it came out of nowhere. And I would hear that from people who I would never expect to know detail about ballot propositions. So I think some of those more simple messages do resonate to voters that maybe a ballot measure doesn't make any darn sense. And that one might have reverberated.
Yeah, and 65 might be one factor, but also, you know, public citizens joining oversight board, ensure transparency, accountability, right? That seems like a no-brainer. Yeah, like, you know, but they're cutting that for bureaucracy as an excuse. So maybe voters doesn't like that.
Well, and to your point, actually, to your excellent point, the map, the precinct map, I would say reflects for Prop D who rejected Prop D. The West Side, the kind of progressive core of the city, and progressives love local control. West Side loves local control on the Planning Commission. They like small d democracy. They like all these little boards where they can have their say and where they can actually serve.
Conditional use,
which is
their favorite.
Which is different than that. We want to push out kind of you can kind of dissect it between like we want to push out the insidery people, get rid of the corruption, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And instead,
there's a difference there.
Yeah, instead to the voter, it might have sounded like we want to get rid of your ability to be in City Hall.
So we're keeping the animal welfare commission for you. Yes.
Yeah.
We talked about
For
that
the
last
horses.
time.
Right. I mean, I also think that there's an element of just voter confusion when we have two measures that look the same on their face, and I think a lot of people, like we of course are in the weeds on all these things and take the time to understand the ramifications, but I think the majority of voters are just looking at that and they're like, what? And then they text us and we're like, I don't know.
I was up until 5 a.m. for elections, let me tell you.
But that happened a couple of years ago with there were two housing related ballot measures that were both, I think it was C and, was it also C and E?
D and C and D or something.
Yeah. But they both wound up failing because I think that confusion factor plays a role.
That's
in that.
another great point about surprising things on the election night. One of the things one of the conventional wisdoms that people hold on to is that if the ballot's too long, people tend to just say no because they don't want to think about it anymore. And we have seen that happen in the past in San Francisco, but not with this one. I wonder why.
Talking about surprises too, and on that, the police one really surprises me too. With I know we were talking about it a little bit, but like back in March, you had measure
tax, ENAV.
Yeah, all these like giving more power to the police pass, but when it comes to giving them some retirement benefits, people voted pretty clear, somewhat clearly that they definitely don't want this. I don't know whether that has to do with maybe some sort of worry about the economy, putting extra pressure on the budget, but that one definitely surprised me a little bit.
Yeah. And also the firefighter one barely passed, so that's also surprising.
People love firefighters.
Yeah. See,
Every
there
kid
might
wants
be
to
a
be one.
political wind shift in the city right now. Like, the pro-public safety, law and order is probably not the biggest selling point anymore.
Yeah. That's that waning we were talking about.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I was trying to approach the POA president last night, but got rejected. Even
Emphasis
before
on trying, huh?
even before I tried to mention anything.
I love that when you walk up to someone to talk and they're like, nope.
Definitely happened to me last
Usually
night too.
Great to see ya. Straight for the door.
I had an official, I will not say who literally ran the other way. Ran.
I take that as a compliment.
I do.
Oh my god.
I'm like,
This is one of the most fun things about being a reporter, honestly. All right, we've got a really great question, and it's specifically for you, Gabe. I don't know why, but how can SF drain the swamp?
Whoa! Make San Francisco great again, Gabe.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, I think a really interesting thing that we're going to see in the next couple months is who Daniel Lurie brings in. When I was with the San Jose Mercury News, and Matt Mahan, who was actually like a political rookie at the time, came in, beat longtime progressive Cindy Chavez. Matt Mahan was kind of a protege of Sam Liccardo. He promised a lot of change, but he actually kept in a lot of Sam Liccardo's people and got a lot of flack for that, for being like, hey, why are you like not changing things? Why are you, and he still, Matt Mahan still remains very popular in San Jose, but that I think like, will Lurie actually drain the swamp? I don't know. I don't think so. Like, I feel like that like when we saw Trump come into office, he still hired on people who were, institutional figures in the federal government, right? Right. So, I mean, the department heads will be interesting to see. I think it remains to be seen. I don't know whether he truly will do that.
Yeah, I mean, he said to me in my interview with him on ABC7 that he intends to make department heads re-interview for their jobs. Like, I think, again, it remains to be seen what exactly that looks like and what the outcome would be. Mayors are hamstrung in certain department heads in terms of choosing that person So
Prop D would have changed that.
They can always use our charter bot. Very useful on the website.
Can I go real nerdy on this swamp question real quick?
Sure.
Oh man. Okay, one of my favorite stories, a news story that inspired me to get into journalism, was called Willie Inc. How Willie Brown made juice politics, and it was two investigative reporters at the Chronicle who used to be at the Examiner, who wrote this whole story about all the patronage jobs Willie Brown created out of whole cloth, just invented jobs and hired like hundreds of people and got them into city government. And that was one of the ways he wielded soft power, was by having all of these people who essentially owed him for their livelihoods, who he could call on to be like, yo, get that permit and move it faster, or kill that project, or whatever. This was how he wielded his power. I wonder how many, it's 20 years ago that this happened, 23 years ago. I wonder how many of those people are still in City Hall. How many patronage jobs are left over from the Brown administration, the Newsom administration, the Lee administration? How many of those people that people of those camps can call on for those favors, for that soft power, are still scattered in different city departments? And where did they go? Are they leveraged now? Does Lurie leverage them?
So do you think the city family will be gone or no?
That's the question. That's what's so fascinating.
I mean, last night there was no one there at the event, I mean, yeah.
He doesn't, he's not connected with, as we call it, right, the city family. Yeah. So fascinating.
And he was not at John's Grill.
He was not.
Because his campaign didn't want him to be there, because they didn't want him to appear as if he was part of this machinery.
Oh yeah.
There was a giant Levi's sign hanging over.
Oh really?
Literally hanging over the event.
Wow.
Secret sponsor.
Oh, those little touches.
Most important question: what's Daniel Lurie going to choose for his drapes in his City Hall office?
Oh wow! As he sizes them up, are they going to be denim?
Yes.
Oh man.
All denim.
Yeah, the jean machine. Yeah. I'm coining that now.
Ooh, okay, I like that.
Ooh.
The jean
fire.
Machine.
That's fire. That's fire.
All right, 1 minute left. Quick takes. What are you watching for in the next few days?
I would hope the new mayor and the new board of supervisors might kind of work together more closely, because we can see Breed is always blaming a lot of things, but if they can work together more, maybe there are fewer, ballot masher on the ballot that asking the voters to weigh in, right? So the City Hall, and internally can work better. Yeah.
If the numbers do go the way that they are continuing to go, and Bree does leave, I am really fascinated to see what her final moves in office are. What does she do? What does Bree do with her final days?
I was actually going to say the same thing, but
I stole it.
I think the makeup of the board is going to be really interesting. I mean, Lurie can say he wants to do a lot of stuff, but like if he doesn't have allies on the board, then what is he going to do? So I think to me that's like the one of the most important things to watch as the days come.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you all so much for joining and tuning in. You can check out all of our coverage at sfstandard.com, and please subscribe to Power Play, our very fun political newsletter where we will be talking about all these things in the days and weeks to come.